This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
You're listening to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, and this is your weekly reminder to take up big space in life, laugh loudly, absorb new knowledge, and continue to grow and expand. What She Said is your space for the big conversations that matter and the little joys that make life sweeter. This is where empowerment meets self-care and mansplaining has no seat at the table. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's jump into it because life's too short not to embrace the good stuff while we tackle the tough stuff.
And young women, it seems to me, are largely and understandably kind of turning away a little bit from what they see as a bad bargain for them. There was just a study the other day that said, young women who are single are quite happy. Young men who are single are less happy. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think young men have to ask themselves why that is. If they want to be partnered, why is it that women are finding them problematic?
That's Elizabeth Renzetti, and in today's podcast, I sit down with Liz to talk about her latest book, What She Said, Conversations About Equality. Let's just say it's a perfect fit. Elizabeth Renzetti is an award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and an unflinching voice on gender equality. Her latest book is a deep, sharp, and often witty look at the state of women's rights. It covers everything from pay inequity to the chilling effects of online harassment, the silencing of victims through NDAs, the ongoing erosion of reproductive rights, and the backlash against feminism that's playing out in real time. In our conversation, we get into all of it. Why progress on women's rights often triggers a backlash, how media narratives shape our understanding of gender, and why younger generations are increasingly polarized on these issues. We also talk about what we can do to push back, build stronger alliances, and make sure women's voices continue to be heard. Let's hear what she said. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today. When your book came across my email with What She Said, I couldn't think of a better fit than to have you on my show.
Absolutely.
So what inspired you to write What She Said? Was there a specific moment or event that made you decide this was the time to write this book?
I think I had just been noticing that women's rights, as well as the rights of trans and non-binary people, were being rolled back. Not just in North America, but around the world. And I wanted to tell that story through the lens of the reporting that I have done for the past, almost 30 years. I worked at the Globe and Mail, and I wrote a lot on gender issues. So I wanted to tell that story through the reporting I've done, but also through the lens of my own personal history.
And I imagine writing for that long, you must have seen a clear shift in our culture. I suppose maybe moving from hopeful into a little bit sad right now with what we're seeing. So you talk about this backlash against women's advancement in the introduction. How do you see this manifesting today? And do you think there's anything we should be doing immediately to counter it?
So Backlash, of course, comes from Susan Faludi's great 1991 book, and I feel like I've been writing about that book since 1991. And her point is, and I encourage everyone to read it and her other books, her point is that every time women make even incremental gains towards equity, equality, an even playing field, there is an immediate snapback, an immediate punishment, which it sort of pushes you even farther back than we had been originally. So it's a very useful kind of tool to look at, a useful image. And I don't think that we can possibly argue that we are not in such a moment right now, quite profoundly. I mean, a man who is adjudicated as a rapist is the most powerful person in the United States right now and has surrounded himself with a cabinet of people accused of sexual misconduct. They're talking about rolling back in the United States DEI initiatives, which affect racialized people and trans people and women as well. We have people openly saying that women should no longer serve in the military, kind of thing. In Europe, we have the former president of South Korea came to power in this great wave of anti-feminist hatred, essentially. There was just a poll out of young UK men in the last week saying that they feel that women's rights have actually are detrimental to men's well-being and that they have gone too far. Whereas I would argue, and I think a lot of feminists would argue, most feminists would argue, that they have not gone nearly far enough.
Yeah, it certainly feels like we've hit a a glass ceiling or a brick wall, however you want to phrase it right now, with the advancement of women's rights. And at the same time, we're seeing this rise on the internet of people like Andrew Tate and Joe Rogan, a lot of this red pill content, as they call it. How much do you think the internet has shaped this conversation?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. I do not think we can, technology often causes huge societal shifts for obvious reasons when it's taken up. As the internet is. The internet is ubiquitous now. It's our friend. It's the water we swim in. It's how we communicate. And so I think when you have the sort of dueling aspect of young men who feel isolated, who feel detached from maybe their communities, their friends, their family, who maybe don't even have that many friends, and you have somebody online offering to be their friend and offering very, I would say, ridiculous solutions, such as, it's all the fault of women and women's rights. That's much easier for them to hear than it is. We need to remake the society to make it fairer for everyone, including you. It's just much easier to dangle a Ferrari and a set of six packs and to say, oh, I'm just asking questions here and to talk about MMA. And I think that's how they kind of sucker young men in. And then young men find a sense of community in there.
In the chapter, the What's the Price of Silence, there was a lot in there. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, reading about, or I should say reminiscing, I suppose, about Weinstein and Kavanaugh and so on. And you talk about the systemic use of NDAs and their role in perpetuating inequality. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a very long time, women and men who were the subject of sexual harassment complaints who launched sexual harassment complaints in workplaces and in other places would, as part of their settlement, would often be asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, also sometimes a non-disparagement agreement. These started as ways to protect intellectual property, and you can see why. Like if you're an employee, you can't talk about your employer's beautiful new product out there in the world, and that makes sense. So what happened is that it became this way of silencing women who had legitimate complaints of sexual misconduct that they lodged, and they got settlements, but they were told they could never speak about these settlements, not even to their doctors sometimes, not even to their therapists, not even to their families. So we have this situation where a woman might well have needed money for whatever reason, for a lawyer, for rent, who knows. And what that money meant in the long run is that she's not allowed to talk about this singular dark thing that happened to her that has probably affected her life quite seriously. I talked to Bonnie Robichaud, who is in her 70s now and was the subject of one of the great workplace harassment cases in Canadian history. She had the law changed. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. She was sexually assaulted essentially by her boss in the 1970s. And she said to me, that the worst thing that happened to her was having to sign an NDA. And to this day, she regrets having signed that NDA. So I don't think we realize how pernicious that is to make somebody do that. There's a group called Can't Buy My Silence that is doing amazing work around the globe, based here in Canada and in the UK. Julie McFarlane and Zelda Perkins started it to fight against the, kind of the proliferation of NDAs, and they're winning some good fights.
And, those NDAs, though, also mean that the person perpetrating the crime can continue with impunity. Other women are not protected if you have to remain silent. So it sort of just becomes this vicious cycle, the NDAs.
They can continue to do what they were doing. Sometimes they're made to leave the workplace where they perpetrated these acts, but then no one knows when they go on to the next workplace, right? There's no trail. So how can you know that this person was behaving this way at a former workplace? So it covers up the worst kind of abuses and allows them to flourish.
You highlight the gaps in equality for marginalized groups as well. So racialized, queer, disabled women. How do you think these voices can be better amplified in sort of the broader feminist movements?
Absolutely. It's so crucial. It's like, I think, the most crucial thing for the health of the movement. And it's crucial because these are, in my research, everybody's research says, these are usually the groups that are most harmed by unequal policies, right? They're the ones who, racialized women have a much higher pay equity gap than white women do, for example. And they aren't nearly as well represented in the media and things like that, or in politics. So I think we have to I made a very conscious effort in this book to try to tell some of those stories, to reach out to those people as sources, to be as inclusive as I could. And what I worry now is that, we were starting to do that a little bit, and it was fantastic. And now the door seems to be, it's like a backlash against inclusivity, a backlash against useful DEI initiatives. And we're in this moment as well of, some people call it like resegregation in the United States. We are in a really frightening moment where sort of anybody who is not a white man is going to suffer more, I think.
In Who Tells the Stories, you discuss media's role in shaping narratives about gender. And I think with the election we saw very clearly how media is owned by, some select groups of people who really control the messaging. So, I mean, I don't think you find the media's coverage of this more equitable at this time, but, where do you see this going with media right now in 2025 and beyond?
Well, for about 20 years, large media here, and I'm talking about private broadcast and private newspapers, have really suffered, right? Like have been in free fall because of the fleeing of advertising to online platforms. Right now, what we have are the major newspapers in the United States. So the Washington Post and the LA Times are owned by male billionaires. The New York Times owned by a family, but what I still call Twitter, sorry, X.
No, you do not need to apologize for that.
I have fled X. I want you all
Yes.
to know I'm on Blue Sky now. Is owned by Elon Musk, who is not only misogynist, been accused of sexual harassment by women who work at his companies, but has most recently decided to throw in his lot with the fascists of the world and gave a fascist salute at the presidential inauguration. These are not people who are going to use their platforms to make things more equitable for normal people in the world. They're just not. They're going to use the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, the LA Times, both decided not to endorse a presidential candidate this year. Musk also was all in for Trump. So even though Kamala Harris was by every measure a better candidate, a more suitable candidate, for one thing, she was not convicted of any crimes. She did not have all of these crimes hanging over her head, or alleged crimes in some cases. She was not, you could go admit she'd not made racist remarks about people. Like she had not incited a riot on the capital of the country. And yet, because these media moguls saw that their wallets, which had billions of dollars in them, could have a few more $1 billion in them, they threw their lot in with Trump. And I think we now are, even in the first couple weeks of his presidency, seeing the results of that.
Yeah, and for Canadians too, I think a lot of Canadians don't understand how much that influences our news as well. A great many people don't understand that, the National Post, the Financial Post, that's owned by Chatham Management Group.
An American hedge fund owns the
Yep.
largest chain of newspapers in this country.
And largely right wing.
Oh, yeah, very right. It's much more right wing than it was when it started. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And what did you think of Elizabeth May's comments the other day about designating these platforms like X and Facebook and so on as publishing platforms so that they can no longer hide behind sort of this, we don't have control over what's said in these spaces? Did you hear that conversation she gave?
I didn't, but that's really interesting because I think so they could be regulated like broadcasters, for example.
Exactly.
Right. I think it makes complete sense because right now they are almost entirely deregulated, and they fight any type of regulation with the fierceness, ferocity of like rabid tigers. And this is the reason why you cannot on your Facebook or your Meta or your Instagram see any Canadian news. It's insane to me. It's why Google is hiding Canadian news results, because they don't want to share even the tiniest, little handful of pennies from the billions in profits they receive from taking news that has been generated by editors, reporters, TV reporters. And part of the backlash, I think, in the States against Biden, and the reason you see Jeff Bezos and you see, Sam Altman and you see Zuckerberg at the inauguration, is that Biden's government actually tried to regulate big tech. They were trying the way Europe has tried. They were making good progress on breaking up companies. And these men could not stand the thought that there was that there should be any leash whatsoever on their ambitions, no matter how much it hurts, the average consumer viewer.
You touched on this a little bit previously, but you mentioned a growing gender divide among younger people. I have 2 young daughters in their 20s, and I hear this frequently,
Mm-hmm.
and of course see it with their peers. But young men in particular are adopting more conservative views, as we sort of mentioned. So how can we engage those younger men in these conversations about equality?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I have a 19-year-old, a girl, a woman now, and a 23-year-old who's a man. So I watched all of this sort of unfold in front of me, and they come home and tell me things sometimes, and I'm like, what? It's a huge issue, and it is sort of fundamental, and it is going to take, I always say this about violence against women, will take a whole of society response. It will take the response of, it's starting right from the beginning, from the way we socialize boys and girls. And right now we socialize them very, very differently. I always use this example, but it's true. I was a face painter for a long time. I always face painted at the kids' carnivals, and their school fairs. And if a little boy ever asked for like a flower or a unicorn or a rainbow on his face, his parents, like 99% of the time, would be, no, that's for girls. Don't you want to be a ninja? Don't you want to be Superman? And I would think, oh my God, I would say, no, he can have the flower. Like, we just do such a poor job from the very early age of teaching boys to be fully human, teaching girls to be fully human, to embrace all aspects of their personalities. So I think once we get away from this idea of equating masculinity with power with dominance, with exploitation, we will, have gone somewhere. And young women, it seems to me, are largely and understandably kind of turning away a little bit from what they see as a bad bargain for them. There was just a study the other day that said, young women who are single are quite happy. Young men who are single are less happy. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think young men have to ask themselves why that is. If they want to be partnered, why is it that women are finding them problematic?
How important is education, though, in media literacy in schools?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. Yeah. Again, going back to this idea of violence against women, what the advocates will all tell you is that, we know the answers, we know what to do. Nobody ever implements the solutions. One of the solutions is that you start teaching healthy relationships very, very, very early, like kindergarten early. You start modeling what a good relationship looks like, what compromise looks like, what a good conversation between two people looks like, what conflict resolution looks like. And then that way, when they're 15 and start dating, they have some tools that they can use to talk to each other. And in terms of media literacy, yeah, 100%, because we have grown up on this and are still fed this idea of women largely being rescued, and also that somebody who's quite forceful and repeated in their attempts to, gain your attention will eventually gain your attention. But that's not very far from what young women call love bombing, which is
right,
incessant not taking no for an answer. So I think, yeah, there's a whole bunch of areas where we could definitely do a better job.
Hey listeners, I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa, and this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers. She said she enjoyed hurting things that can't fight back.
Like, if you were only to look at what she did later on and not know any of that history, she would appear like off the wall crazy.
Oh, 100%. She struck him on the back of his head with a frying pan, almost killing him, and was hospitalized for a severely fractured skull.
She fractured his
skull.
Wow. So the movie Tangled was right. Frying pans are dangerous.
They are. He feels like he is totally justified in the murder that he commits.
Even after he's convicted, he feels justified.
Oh yeah, to this day.
That's a confident dirtbag right there.
That's right. He believes that his victim had it coming.
Join us each Thursday as we unearth the dirtbags that live among us
and the motives buried there. Hope you join us as we exhume the truth.
Hey there, this is Todd Arkell, host of The Mental Approach. Thank you for taking the time to listen to The Mental Approach. I created this series for parents and their athletes because everyone is training their physical skills, but so few of you are training your mind. And I've assembled a cross-section of athletes and coaches as guests to provide you with inspirational stories, practical advice, and some encouragement to gain the edge you need both on and off the field of play. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course at thementalapproach.com.
So What She Said was published in 2024. And of course, the stories just keep coming and coming. When you look at the news today, are there any stories that make you think, I told you so, or God, I wish I could have included this example in the book
all
recently?
Of them? Like every single one.
Like Blake Lively, I'm curious how that would fit into your book, or Giselle Pellico. Yeah. Would those stories have been highlighted?
Yes, I think I would have. Giselle Pellico is very interesting because what will be interesting there is if the bravery of one woman can change attitudes and laws of an entire society, right? Because we can look at her and applaud her, and what she did was so incredibly brave.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet, will the French people take that to heart? Will it change sexist attitudes? I was reading that there is some movement towards changing um, the language around consent in French laws to better. So, women have to be more vocal, or not just women, any person has to be more vocally
Conscious.
conscious for one
Yeah.
thing. I mean, it was just so shocking that but then again, I saw in her case, the things that the defendant's lawyers were saying about her, like, maybe she did enjoy, maybe she was a bit awake, like, whoa. And I just thought, oh my God, we have so many levels to dig down. We have been, as I always say, we have been living in this house that patriarchy built for thousands of years. And it will and the walls are invisible. We all live inside it, and it will take a long time to dismantle. And it goes very deep. The Blake Lively thing also very interesting because it did remind me a bit of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. And I wrote a column about defending Amber Heard when that trial was going on. And I had to go off social media for a few days because the Johnny Depp stands were just a lot of them women, although I think they might also have all been bots, possibly.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's
But
so
they
difficult
came
to
after
tell.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really tell. So, will these things change attitudes? I hope so. I mean, I think the Me Too movement um, changed laws. It changed attitudes. We are living, however, in a period of profound backlash caused by the Me Too movement. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't have happened. I'm glad it happened. It needed to have happened. And, it needs to go, in fact, even further, I would say.
In the book, you share some deeply personal experiences. Was it difficult to include those stories? And what do you hope readers take away from what you shared?
Yes, it was, because when I was going to journalism school, you were taught that, the pronoun I was dirty. It was a dirty word, swear word. Don't put I in your story. You're
Right.
weak. You're weak if you write about
It's not
yourself.
about you.
It's not about you. What are you, weakling? You have, you can't go out and report. So you write about yourself. And fortunately, that has changed a lot. Thank goodness it has. I don't even think that stigma really exists anymore. So I think what we've realized is that the personal story, and we see this with the success of memoirs, right? The personal story is the story that resonates with people. It's where you connect to people on a very personal level. So it's not about policy and it's not about ideology. It's just, this happened to me, and somebody else would be like, oh my God, that happened to me too. So I'm not crazy if it happened to you. And I'm always saying that, on my book tour, women would come up to me and they would preface whatever they were going to say with, I don't know if I'm imagining this. And I would just be like, you're not imagining it, really.
Right.
I can tell even before you open your mouth, you're not imagining it. And probably many others have experienced whatever you're going to tell me. So it was hard because, yeah, a lot of it is, about my family and things like that. And there were definitely things I didn't put in there too. But it's the stuff that readers relate to most, right? It would not have been nearly as good or powerful a book, I don't think, if I hadn't included that. And my editor was right to keep sort of saying, more you, more you. Yeah.
Let's talk about those responses a little bit. Are there any that have particularly moved you or surprised you from readers?
Yes, I got like on this book tour, so many. One woman, she came up to me and she leaned down and she whispered, she said, my husband's been mean to me for 40 years and I'm finally divorcing him. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Not because she read my book, but like
Yeah.
she was just,
Yeah.
she just wanted me to know that. And then a group of women who worked in a male dominated industry who stood up at one of my book talks and said that they were constantly being shushed by their male colleagues, like literally shushed, told to speak more quietly or to not talk at all. And I had that happen as a reporter. I worked across from another reporter who would shush me sometimes. And I'm a pacifist, but in my head, I would picture taking my can of Diet Coke and throwing it at him. And then another lawyer at that same event said, a partner told her that she needed to go to speech. She was a partner in a law firm, a partner. And
Wow.
another partner had said to her, you need to take speech lessons because your voice is annoying. Yeah. So like this, and it was just endless, more like so many I could go on about, but, it was, and then I met a lot of really wonderful women who were in their 70s or 80s who said, you know, I was doing this in the 60s, I was doing this in the 70s, and, you know, I'm glad to see it's still going on. You know, the people are still protesting and writing about this. And I would always thank them for their work, because if they had not done the work, then, you know, we wouldn't be here.
You touch on issues like the erosion of reproductive rights and the global anti-feminist movement. Are there any countries or regions that you think are leading by example in the fight for gender equality? I mean, Iceland comes to mind immediately for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Iceland. There are some countries in Africa that have gender, that require the parliament to have equal numbers of men and women. So that's interesting. Mexico has done some interesting work on femicide, because there's an absolute plague of femicides there. So there are countries, the UK, I think, does a very good job of dealing with gender-based violence. It has a gender-based violence czar who she looks after all the information, makes recommendations, things like that. They have a national helpline, not just for women, but also for men, which I think is very important, where they can call if they're experiencing violence of any kind. We don't have that. We have one line in Ontario. We're kind of shamefully behind in many ways. We do not collect nearly enough data around the violence that happens to women in this country, and we don't then publicize or promulgate that information to the public so that they know. So I think that's one of the main areas where we fall down in terms of gender-based violence anyway.
You know, as you said, we're sort of facing this global backlash right now against feminism. What do you think the next wave of feminism is going to look like?
Oh, nobody has ever asked me that question. That is excellent. You know what I would like to see? I would like to see it led by young people, racialized people of different abilities, and I would like them to be men and women. I would like them to, and non-gendered people of non-binary people, transgendered people. So I would like to see a true alliance. So feminism has been, as we know, white and middle class for a very long time. If there was an alliance between all kinds of people of all genders and backgrounds, I think that could be very useful, because then you would kind of deflate one of the main arguments against the movement, which is that it's exclusive and exclusionary. So that would be amazing. And also, really, we're not going to get nearly anywhere as far as we need to unless men step up and actually start taking seriously the terrible things that are happening in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I've been on TikTok now for a few years, started, you know, during the pandemic, and naturally the algorithm feeds you what you're interested in. So for me, that is, you know, feminist issues. And really was hanging on every word of Black content creators on that platform for many years. Has completely helped shape how I view feminism and what I thought I knew but didn't really know about feminism. And so I agree with you that I really hope that they are, you know, at the front this time. And it's not white women trying to push their voices aside, of course, with all the other voices that you mentioned. But I really think that platform helped amplify those voices in a great way in the last few years, even though sadly, I you know, with 92% of them voting for Kamala Harris, and we still saw this great pushback I can understand how they would be discouraged, but I do hope that they're at the front of this next wave, because there will be one. As you know, as disheartening as it might feel right now for people, there will be another wave of feminism.
And that's a great example right there. You subscribe with your money to their Substacks, and you Patreon those pages, and you listen to them, and you retweet them, or you post their stories, do all of that stuff so that their voice is amplified, their light shines, and not just because like, oh, it's a good thing to do. No, it's because they're like have so many better solutions and have
Absolutely.
experiences that shape a way of being in the world that we need to learn from.
What do you hope readers then will do after finishing the book? Not walk away thinking, but will actually do after walking away from reading your book?
Well, I had a lawyer in Hamilton who used the book as a weapon to push a man away who was harassing her in the park. So, like, there you go. It can be a weapon. If somebody's bothering you, and you could use it, and she sort of held it up like you'd hold up the Bible to a vampire and said, "Get away from me," and he did. So, like, wow. What do I hope people do? I tend not to be like proscriptive, like this is what you need to do and this is what you need to do. But the one thing I want people to do is to not be quiet. And this is what I'm worried about in this political environment we're in right now, is that people will feel deadened. They'll feel exhausted. They'll feel cowed. They'll feel afraid, and they will become silent. And that is the worst thing that could happen, right? Like, the forces that want to drive us back are not silent. So we cannot be silent either. And we have to speak up. We have to speak up in groups. We have to support each other. We have to not infight. And that's what I would say. So do whatever your little speak up thing is. If it's having a conversation with your partner or your kids or your friends or going to a rally or volunteering, whatever your thing is, you can do it.
Yeah, I think social media is a challenging one right now for women. So because of the lack of privacy, the threats to safety, life, even, it's crazy. But I think right now that move to those in-person conversations is invaluable.
Well, that's how it started, right? That's what the suffragists did. That's what the great, movements of the 70s in terms of feminist conscious raising did. It's what the civil rights movement has always known, which is that you show up in person, with your actual paper. So I do hope we return to kind of like a more embodied protest. It's just social media is killing us too.
It is.
So there's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. I mean, we need it's something I think about a lot. There are no safe spaces for women on the internet. They do not exist. There is not a safe space. And we so desperately need that. And I don't know how we get that space or who we go to. But I think about it every day, because we are in danger every day that we put our opinions out there, because we could grab the attention of the wrong person at the wrong time. And it's a real fear, I think, that we all live with.
Yeah. Maybe we need a women-only space online somewhere.
We really do.
Then that the Andrew Tates out there would be like, "Oh, look at that! They're blah, blah, blah."
Who cares? Who cares? Yeah, they would all be demanding that they be let in, and it's just we see it everywhere. It's like all the people who were sort of left-leaning, left Twitter en masse to just get away from the toxicity of that platform. So they all went to Threads, and then of course all of the bad actors just followed you over there because they can't live without you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know. They're like parasites. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So who cares what they would think about a women's only platform, but we desperately need a safe space for that. So after decades of sort of writing about feminism and equality, then what is keeping you optimistic about the future, and what is keeping you personally motivated?
I met a lot of young women on this tour, and I was always so happy to see them when they came out and they were fully engaged. And I talked to young women for the book as well. And the work that they're doing is fantastic. I just sent off a video message to this organization of young women leaders at McMaster University. So and some people say, oh, they don't believe in feminism. They think all the problems are solved. I'm like, oh no, they don't. No, they have their own things to deal with. They have their deep fake issues to deal with. And they have, online dating, which is terrible. And they face the same problems we did with, promotion, advancement, pay equity issues, fear of women in leadership. So I see young women doing really, really powerful work and being very brave about it in ways that maybe I wasn't so brave when I'm brave now, but I wasn't probably when I was 22. And they give me huge hope. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, honestly, I don't think I was completely, I'm going to say radicalized, and putting that in quotes, until much later in life. Yeah. And I wish I had the insights and the knowledge that a lot of these young women have today. Like my daughters, I'm sure your daughter has it as well.
Oh yeah. We talk about this stuff all the time. It's quite something.
So Liz, where can people get the book? Where should they follow you online? And if they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
I'm just Liz at elizabethrenzetti.com. That's on my website. I am at Liz Renzetti on, oh my God, Instagram, which I still love because I put pictures of my cat and pictures of what I read and things like that on Instagram. I'm not really on very many other, Blue Sky. I'm at Liz Renzetti on Blue Sky. And the book you can get whatever bookshop you buy your books from, or the library. I always tell people you can borrow it from the library. Writers do get money once a year from people who borrow their books from the library. So I love libraries. So you can get it anywhere, really.
And I know that writers are always into their next book.
Yeah.
So what's next?
I am also a mystery writer. So I write mystery novels with my friend Kate Hilton. And the first one was called Bury the Lead, and it came out last year. The second one is called Widows and Orphans, and it comes out in May, and we're working on the third one right now. So you can, if you like my other writing, you can find me as a mystery writer as well.
All right. Fantastic. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Candace. It was wonderful.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with someone who'd love it too. And don't forget to hit subscribe to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, on your favorite podcast app. It's the easiest way to stay connected. Want more? Sign up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com to get all the latest updates, and let's keep the conversation going on social. You can find What She Said on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll find me on Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Candace Said. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Are your poor communication skills holding you back from being the leader you know you can be? The Master Communicator is a podcast that can help you improve your communication skills in just a few minutes a week. I'm David Tyler, a broadcaster and communication coach, and each week I deliver bite-sized masterclasses for busy leaders like you. Each episode is packed with practical techniques and strategies to help you navigate challenging conversations, delivering impactful messages, and inspire your team. Whether you're looking to enhance your executive presence, build a culture of trust, or simply lead with more confidence, the Master Communicator is your go-to resource. Subscribe now and start your journey to becoming the leader you were meant to be. Transform your communication skills, one episode at a time.
Hi, this is Terry Evans. I've been waking Edmontonians up for over 40 years. When people ask me, when are you starting a podcast? The answer was usually, never. I always thought doing the radio show was enough. Yet here we are, and I have reluctantly jumped in with both feet. with a new show featuring remarkable people with fantastic stories that deserve to be heard. The stories told in the first person by the storytellers themselves, comics, musicians, sports personalities, entrepreneurs, wackos, weirdos, and nutbars. I've met them all, and in a large part, they've been a huge part of my world and the world of those who listen to my morning show every day. You might say that they have made my world go round. Good friends and great conversations. Reluctantly with Terry Evans on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at reluctantlypodcast.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.